Blessed and highly favored. Can you turn me down just a little bit back here? All right. Well, we're finally finishing up grace. What do you think about that statement? You think that's possible? No, absolutely. So we've been looking at this for 8 weeks. We've been trying to take a deeper look into grace, kind of outlining it, seeing what it is. Obviously, we could be continuously every single day for the rest of our lives talking about grace, whether it's a testimony of what God has done for you, whether it's something you witnessed that God has done for someone else, or whether it's something that you heard about. But grace is every single day. We are coated with grace. And we see grace from God. So we looked at many different aspects of grace. We started out with the salvation, the saving grace of God, what God did, what the sacrifice that He made so that we could have salvation, so that we could have eternal life. Then we talked about liberating grace, and we talked about what? After liberating, anybody know? We talked about guilt and grace. We talked about transforming grace. What did we talk about last week?
Saving grace, freedom grace, restoring grace, and then
What was
last week was living in grace.
living in grace. So that's all. Those are all good things. And then the second part is we have saving grace. We've been transformed because of grace. We have the ability to live in grace, which means God has given us the ability to function in this world because of His grace. But then He tells us there's another part of grace that's as important, just like what He said. Look, what's the first commandment? Love me, love God. Second one is to love each other, right? So He says, look, if I give you grace, if I show grace upon you, what is your responsibility to do now? Share grace. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is our responsibility, or what it means for us to share grace. If you look at Matthew 10:8, He says, give as freely as you have received. So let me ask you this. What price did you pay for salvation? What did you pay? But what was paid for your salvation? Christ. So He says, look, as freely as it was given to you, you are to give grace to others. Now, we all can agree that a lot of us aren't very good at showing grace on other people. Some of us hold grudges. Some of us get angry with people. Some of us talk bad about other people. Some people hold on to things, grudges, anger, resentment. But God says, look, I gave it to you. Now you're supposed to give it to others. It says freely. If you've given it freely, you give it away freely. Look at 2 Corinthians with me, chapter 9 and verse 8. He said, and God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. Another translation says, and God will generously provide all you need, then you will always have everything you need and plenty left over to share with others. Now, how many of us can say that the reason I don't give, whether it's financial, whether it's your time, whether it's your possessions, whatever it is, the reason I don't give is that I don't have anything to spare? Come on, be honest. How many times do we say that? I don't have another minute. Oh, I'd love to help you, but I ain't got time today. Anybody ever say that? Oh, I'd love to help you, but my bills are due tomorrow and I only got $5 left. Oh, I'd love to help you, but to be honest with you, I don't really like you a whole lot. We don't say that, but we think that, right? Some of you might actually say that, but in most cases you don't say that, but you think that. I'd like to help you, but I really just don't like you very much. But see, if we change that and say, wait a minute, God gave me this $10. And he says that if I believe in him and I have faith in him and I have trust in him, that he gave me this $10. It was a gift from him. I did nothing to deserve it. He gave it to me. You need it. It says, as freely as it was given to me, I am to give it to others. So what should I do with that $10? Give it to you. Should I be like, oh, now I got to worry about how I'm going to replace that $10? Right? What should I do? Trust. Because God says, look, if I gave it to you, and this verse we just read, what did it say? Anybody hear anything magical in there? It says, look, he says, I'll bless you abundantly, the things that you have at all times, and having all that you need. Now, I can say there's times I haven't had what I want. Anybody else got an amen to that? I haven't got what I want. And sometimes, thank God, I didn't get what I want, right? But I've never not had what I needed. I thought I wasn't getting what I needed. You know, I thought that because it wasn't when I wanted it or when I thought I needed it, I wasn't getting what I needed. But I can tell you there's never been a time that I have never had what I've needed. Have I skipped a meal before? Yes, I've had to skip a meal before because I didn't have money. Sure. Obviously, I didn't need that meal. Obviously, I've made up for it. Just like Hammer just said, look, I'm done. I'm good. But I've never not had what I needed. Never. And I think that if you truly think about it, you can say the same thing, that you've never gone without. You may have thought you were without. You may have thought you were struggling. You may have thought that God had abandoned you, but when you look back at it today, you'll see that God never left you. He never abandoned you, and you never were left without need. He said, you will abound in every good work. See a pattern here? It all starts with our ability to recognize what God has done with us. That makes it easier for us to do for others. Verse 32 says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as Christ God forgave you. That's what sharing grace is all about. So I show grace to others when I am what? Kind. There's a new song out. What is it? How's it go? Something along the lines of, when did kindness become a, what's the word? It's not revolution. It's a revolutionary. When did kindness become revolutionary? This is something we have been supposed to be doing forever. The United States has more documented Christians than any other country, but yet in America they're singing a song saying, when did kindness become revolutionary? See, I'm showing grace to others when I'm being kind to others. Do you know that kindness is love in action? It's visible and it's practiced. Kindness is love in action. In other words, you can say, well, I was kind to so-and-so because I didn't talk bad about them today. Yes, that was kind and we appreciate it. But did you really show kindness by being there when they needed you? There's an example in the Bible, we've all read it probably before, in Luke chapter 10, verses 30 through 35, and it's the story of the Good Samaritan. In the story of the Good Samaritan, it simply says that this man was going down the street. He was walking down the street, getting ready to go from one town to the next. And on his way down there, he was attacked. He was mugged. And he was stripped of all of his clothes, stripped of everything he had. He was beaten and he was thrown in the ditch to die. And these different people walked by, and the story talks about that a rabbi or a priest or a religious person or whatever you want to call him, he walked by first, and guess what he did? Kept on going. And then someone else walked by. Go to the next verse. 32? Never mind. That's fine. I got it right here. I'll just read it. So then a Levite came by. So now we got racism in the Bible right there. A Levite came by, and he came to the place, and he saw him, and he passed on by. Why do you think he passed by? Because he's like, look, this guy's, he's not anybody to me. He's of a totally different race. He's of a different generation. He's of everything. I don't want anything to do with him. He kept walking by. But then this last guy, the third guy, walks by, and you guys all know the story. We even talk about, there's even a law in the United States called the what? The Good Samaritan Law. Yeah, we're not a nation built off the Bible, but we have a law called the Good Samaritan Law, which came off of this Luke chapter 10. The Good Samaritan walks by. He sees this guy. He goes down. He gets off of his donkey. He goes down to the ditch. He goes down to the ditch. Do you realize that, guys? You can stop right there and do a whole sermon about the fact that the man went down into the ditch where he was. He went down into the ditch. He took pity on him. He felt sorry for him. He went down into the ditch. He began to bandage his wounds. Now, let me tell you something. The oils and the incense and the wine and everything they used on that was not cheap. But he used the wine. He uses the oils. He used the bandages, and he wrapped them up around this guy. And then he put him on his own donkey. He went from riding to where he was going to now walking and carrying this guy. And he gets him over there, and he takes him into an inn, and he's got business to do, and he says, hey, here's what I want you to do. You take care of him. Here's some money. If it's not enough, let me know. And when I come back, I'll take care of whatever's left over. When I come back, I'll take care of it when I'm done. Would you think that this is kindness in action? It was kindness in action. So the first thing he did, the first thing we need to do to be kind is to see the need. We got to see the need. There's too many times we walk around ignoring what's going on in the world. There's too many times that we sit in churches looking at people all around us and knowing that there's a problem, but we refuse to look at the problem. Knowing that they're struggling, but we refuse to acknowledge that they're struggling. See, we got to learn to look. Well, I love it because all this kind of all goes together, because in Acts we've been talking a lot about the first churches, and we talked a little bit about it in Acts chapter 3 about when Peter and John came to the man sitting out front of the gate, and he reaches down, and the first thing that Peter says to that guy was what? For those that are coming to Bible study on Sunday nights, look at me. I'm looking at you, you look at me. He wanted them to see that he was paying attention, that he was recognizing that there was a need this guy had. And he says, look, I ain't got no money, but what I got is a lot better. Because the guy needed more than money. See, we got to see the need. We got to see what's going on around us. If we're going to be kind, if we're going to show grace, we got to see the need. See, when God looked down on this earth, he saw that it was messed up, jacked up, it was corrupted, it was full of sin, and he saw the need that I had in my life. And he said, look, I got to fix this. They don't know. Even Jesus said, Lord, or Father, please forgive them, for they don't know. God knows we don't know what's right for us. We don't know how to live in this world. We don't know how to do things right. No matter how intelligent you think you are, the fact is you ain't got everything in your life figured out. And the fact is you ain't done everything right. The only thing you've done right so far today is you showed up. We're still waiting to see what you do when you leave, right? But the first phase was you showed up this morning. But God said, look, I know that you've messed up. I saw the need. I sent my son. Now this Good Samaritan, he saw the need. Look in verse 33. He said, but a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. When he saw him, he wasn't the first guy to see him, but he saw him in a different way. He saw him in a man that needed his help. Do you know that we can't meet the need of somebody until we see the need? You can't meet the need, and hurry kills kindness. Hurry kills kindness. The other two guys were in a hurry. They had somewhere to be. The Good Samaritan had somewhere to be. But what did he say? He goes, I got time. I got time for this. But the Samaritan, as he traveled where he came to the man was, and he saw him. How many of us go down the road every single day and we visually see somebody in need, but we don't actually see the need? We see the guy sitting on the curb, but we don't actually see the need of the man sitting on the curb. We just see a man sitting on the curb. We had this talk about it in Acts. We were talking about the guy that was sitting outside the gate in Jerusalem. The guy was paralyzed from birth. He was unable to walk. And these people just kept walking by him. And Peter and John stopped at him and said, hey, look at me. I'm looking at you. We're acknowledging each other. We're connected. And then when they healed him and he walks inside, we talked about the people being amazed and astonished. And then Peter chews them out. Peter chews them out for it. And I said, wait a minute. Let's stop and pretend we don't know that Peter chewed them out. And let's talk about what we would do and be honest. What would you do? And the example we talked about, if there was a guy that came every Sunday and he says, look, I'm not coming into church, but can I just sit out on the front porch? I can't walk, but I just want to sit on the front porch. And as people come in, maybe they'll help me. Maybe they'll give me something to help me out, some water, some whatever. And I know it's a bad example because here at this church, somebody would pick the poor guy up and bring him in. But I'm just saying, let's just say that happened, okay? And for 6 months, we walked by him. And maybe somebody gave him a bottle of water. Maybe somebody said something to him. But for 6 months, we just walked by him. And on the one day, Hammer walks by and he says, man, I'm going to pray for you right now. I'm stopping right now. I know church is getting ready to start, but it's okay. I'm going to stay out here with you, and I'm going to pray for you. And he prays for this guy, and this guy gets up, and he walks, and he jumps, and he's excited, and he walks into the church. Now, all of you high and mighty Christians, what would you do? You would be amazed. You'd be running to him going, I know you. You were the guy that was sitting out here for 6 months. Is this really you? You'd be astonished. You'd be in awe of what God just did. And of course, the Christian is, oh, well, I expect God to do it. Well, I'm going to tell you, I expect God to do a lot of things, but I'm always in awe of what he does. Because I don't deserve it. I know he can do it, but it doesn't change the fact that I don't deserve it. Chris has heard me say many times, when I look at this church and I look at the fact of what we've done and how we've done it, and I haven't done anything for this to happen. I've done nothing to be able to have the sound stuff we have. You know, you guys that have been here for a while, you know we have every single thing necessary to have a full working worship band. We have drums, we have electric guitar, we have bass guitars, we have keyboards, we have sound equipment, we have monitors, we have things I don't even know what they're called that Chris says we have. We have other stuff here. We could literally, if we had 6 people here that says I play stuff, we could take them, sit them up here, hand them stuff, and play. Why? Because God provided it for us. Every time something comes into this church, I'm amazed that God has done it. Every time the lights come on, guys, some Sundays I was amazed that it still worked. When the rent came up and my wife was like, it's going to be tight, and it got paid, I was amazed that God made it happen. See, being amazed at God is not a bad thing. But see, we miss it because we're too busy hurrying through the process. We're too busy getting from point A to point B. That's the one good thing about motorcycles. It's not about getting to point A to point B. It's the ride in between. If we lived our life like we ride our motorcycles, for some of you, then you would have a much more enjoyable life. If you took time to actually see what's going on in your life instead of focusing on what it is that you're trying to get to. The second thing you got to do is seize the moment. How to be kind is to see the need, seize the moment. That's action. Look at Luke chapter 10, verse 34. He said, he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him into the inn, and took care of him. See, what we got to remember is what I talked about already. He seized the moment. He went down to his level. He didn't say, hey, if you can get up here where I'm at, I'll try to help you. Oh, here you go. Here's the Christian thing for you. If you come to church on Sunday, we'll talk to you about God. Anybody guilty of that? Yeah, just come to church on Sunday. Yeah, that's how we get people saved. You just come to church on Sunday. We had a really good discussion on Wednesday about what a church is. Is it a hospital? I say no. How many people like going to the hospital? Maybe that's why people don't come to church as much, right? We keep calling it one. You don't go to the hospital. You go to the hospital what? When you're sick and the doctor can't fix you and you think you're going to die or something's broken and you need to have it refixed. You know what I think a church is? I think a church is a garage. You know why? Because you go to a garage for one or two reasons, right? Maintenance, ain't nothing wrong and I don't want anything to be wrong, or repair. Something's broken and I need it fixed. You don't take care of your bike, you don't take care of your car, what happens? It breaks down. You don't take care of your spiritual life, you break down real quick. When you break down, you go to the garage. Why? Now you need repairs. Something's jacked up. See, for us, when we need grace, we have to be able to seize the moment. Say, look, I see you need something right now, because that might be the time that God's calling you for the harvest. Uh-oh. What happened? That might be the time that God called you to plant a seed. That might be the time that God called you to pour a little water on that seed and get it ready for harvest. You got to seize the moment, guys. Too many times we're in a hurry. Too many times we don't see what's going on. Too many times we expect that someone else is going to do it. There's a whole song about that too, right? I asked God to send somebody. He said, I did. I sent you. That's a famous saying in the Christian community. Somebody should do something about that. Oh, I'm going to call my church. The church should do something about that. That's my favorite one. I'm going to call the pastor and see if the church can do something about this. And what do you do? What do I do when you come to me with that idea? So what would you like to do? What's your plan? You volunteered to head this up? That's great. Let's get on it. Well, no. Obviously, God laid it on your heart. It's your job. You're the somebody that needs to go talk to somebody. We'll help you, but you're the one that got called. Now it's your time to do it. Stop saying somebody and start saying, I am. I will. I'm the one that'll do it. The last part, to be able to show kindness, or how to be kind, is to spend whatever it takes. Look at 10 verse 35. He said, then the next day he took out 2 denarii, and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for the extra expenses you have. See, kindness cost. We learned that from Christ. Sacrifice, grace, kindness cost. But it costs time. It can cost money. It can cost reputation. And it could also cost you to get out of your comfort zone. This guy had to take his time to deal with this. He had to take his money to deal with it. He had to take his reputation. He was a Samaritan. He shouldn't have been touching, dealing, talking with, not the less helping this guy. And he did. See, guys, we got to get to that point that we say, look, grace was given to me at a great cost. You got to think about it. I know it's a short time in God's time, but for 33 years, Jesus came in the form of a man and spent that time here for us. I know it's a short time, but 3 days, Christ decided to fight against the devil, to fight death for you and me. I know it's a short time, but for the time that he was beaten to the time he said it is finished, he took your sins, my sins, and he placed them on top of his body, and he carried those things for you and me. He took the time out of his busy life of answering our silly prayers about winning the lottery, or I hope when I push this button the bike will start today. Please, Lord, please, Lord, please, Lord. Or when we sit there and prayed over and over that that girl that we just couldn't live without in high school would someday be my wife, and you see her today and go, thank God you didn't answer that one. See, he took out of his time to listen to all that, to come here and deal with the true need that we had. He saw the need and he came here. See, guys, being kind takes time. It takes money. It takes your reputation. It takes you to get out of your comfort zone. We got to learn also to be sympathetic. We got to be kind, but we also got to learn to be sympathetic. You know, a lot of guys, especially, I don't know why, struggle with sympathy. I will tell you the honest truth for me, women crying doesn't bother me at all. Isn't that sad? Isn't that sad? It might be from having a daughter that knew how to cry the second she wanted to having two daughters that have followed suit and can do it just as well as she did. But you crying, it don't bother me. No, when you're done crying, let me know. We'll have a talk. Crying doesn't bother me. But if I see somebody that's hurting, and I see someone that's struggling, or I see someone that is thinking that all is lost, that touches me. Because I know what that feels like. I know what it's like to feel like you're nobody. I know what it's like to feel like you have nothing. I know what it feels like to walk through the world thinking that the world hates you and everybody around it is together in that desire to kill you. I know what it's like to be an outcast. I know what it's like to not fit in. So I have sympathy for people. Sympathy simply means you understand or you affirm where that person's at. See, Jesus showed us an example of sympathy. If you look in John chapter 11, verse 33 and 35, it's the story of the death of Lazarus. In 33, he said, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And then in verse 35, here comes the sympathy, guys. Jesus wept. He cried for them. He didn't cry because Lazarus was dead. One of two things we know. If we didn't know the story, we knew one of two things were going to happen. Either him and Lazarus were going to be joined together here shortly, or he was going to heal Lazarus and he was going to walk again. Why would he cry because Lazarus died? Seriously. Why did he cry? He felt bad for the Jews. He felt bad for Mary, who was crying because of Lazarus' death. He had sympathy for them. He felt bad for them. Have you ever, and you guys don't have to raise your hand because I know you're all leathered up and looking cool and stuff, but have you ever cried simply because your child cried, or your dad cried, or your mom cried, or your wife cried, or how about this, the day your kid was born? That's not sympathy. I just want to know if you even cried. But we got to have sympathy for people. We got to understand what they're going through, where they're at. We got to, if nothing else, affirm that what they're feeling is real, that their feelings matter, that where they're coming from is important. That's what grace is saying, yeah, I understand what's going on with you. I affirm and I believe that what you're going through is real. Look at James chapter 1, verse 19. He says, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. You only see that there's only one quick and two slows. Apparently, God understands us. You got to be what? Quick to do what? Listen. Guys, here's a story. Here's the truth. Women like it when you listen. Listen. It's hard to listen because some people don't quit talking. I understand that. Some people, my daughter, Ellis, she could talk you forever. You will have an ear bleed and she'll say, you got two ears, just move over to the other one. I got to finish telling you my story. And the story has no beginning, it has no end, it's just a whole bunch of middle. If you don't believe me, talk to her. You're like, I don't know when this started, and I surely don't know when it ends, but there's a whole lot of middle, and it starts back and forth and over again, and you're like, I have no idea what we're doing. But you still got to learn to listen. You got to be quick. The first thing you got to want to do is hear people. We don't want to hear people. Guys, I'm going to tell you, we're bad about this. I'm bad about this. I've had to work very, 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 very hard at this. It's the first thing I want to do when you start talking. You know what I'm doing in my brain? I'm putting a plan together on how to fix it. I don't even know what the problem is, and I'm already working the plan on how to fix it. Okay? I'm just going to be honest. That's what I do. And I've had to learn to stop because my wife is a fixer too. So if I'm trying to fix something she's already fixing and she's already just telling me the problem just to share with me what the problem is, not because she wants me to do anything, and I'm jumping ahead of her and I'm already fixing the problem, guess what happens at our house? 4th of July comes early. So I've had to learn to say, okay, wait a minute, I don't have to fix everything with her because she already knows to fix things. And if she doesn't, she'll tell me, but I need to hear what it is she wants done. If she wants me to do anything, she just wants me to hear, what does she want me to do? Majority of us, believe it or not, when we talk to somebody else, we don't want them to fix anything. We just want them to hear so that we can process it out ourselves. We process things better when we speak. If you don't believe me, watch a guy working on his motorcycle by himself. He talks a lot. He talks a lot. Why ain't this piece going in here? It should go right on in here. This piece here. Oh, I now see what the problem is. I forgot to take this off. I got to take that off. He's just constantly talking. Why? He's processing through what's going on. We've got to listen. Got to listen. And then it says the second hard part. First, it's very hard for us to listen. The second is we got to be slow to speak. Do you ever wonder why we have two ears and one mouth? But we use the mouth a lot more than we do the ears. We got to be slow to speak. And then we got to be slow to become angry. Have any of you ever been angry before? So angry you could spit nails. And then when you finally calmed down, you realized it wasn't what I thought and I shouldn't have been angry at all. I've been there. Got in a fight with somebody over, you sit there and laughing at each other. You're like, this was stupid. Yeah. There's some wisdom in the Bible. I don't know how that happened. There's all these lessons on how to live here in this Bible, guys. Your marriage, your relationships could be very simple if you follow 3 little rules that were right here in this Bible. Women, you can do the same thing, by the way. You could listen to the guys. I'm just saying. See, you can't be sympathetic if you're immediately trying to fix the problem. Am I done? Am I on now? Okay. Of course, now I don't even know what I said. Got to start all over. Matthew, no, just kidding. See, these three things are very important to us. You can't be sympathetic for someone if you're immediately jumping to the answer of their problem. That's what I love about Celebrate Recovery. Those of you that don't know what it is or hasn't come, Celebrate Recovery is a wonderful program that we have here at the church. We're not the only one that has it. Multiple churches have it. It's throughout the United States. I think it's even throughout the world. This Celebrate Recovery program is awesome. The biggest thing about the Celebrate Recovery program is the whole program is not designed for us as leaders of Celebrate Recovery to fix you. Our job is to listen to you, support you, encourage you, love you, and let God fix you. That's the whole purpose of it. But if we immediately try to speak, we're now trying to fix you, which means not only are we messing up the problem, but now you're frustrated because we don't even really know what the problem is. So we screwed up the program and we couldn't fix your problem, didn't get fixed, and therefore you failed and you leave. See, that's the beautiful thing about Celebrate Recovery. The first thing we do is we listen to each other. We listen. And when we speak about ourselves. We speak about where we're at. And see, that's what we got to learn to do as brothers and sisters in Christ, is to make sure that we listen to each other. We don't have to agree on everything, but we do need to hear each other. God will fix more problems than you can create. Believe it or not, God will fix more problems than you create. But it's a whole lot easier if you quit creating problems. And it starts by just listening. Look at Romans chapter 15, verse 2. It says, each of us should please our neighbors for the good, to build them up. The LB version says, we must bear the burden of being considerate of the doubts and fears of others. See, I like that, because that's kind of where I see Celebrate Recovery at. That's kind of where I see this church at. That's kind of the whole purpose of this church, is to be here for the doubts and the fears of each other. We all have them. Everybody's afraid of something different. Everybody here has a different doubt or issue or problem with something. And see, we're supposed to be sympathetic to where you're at. I was talking to a guy the other day, love him to death, love spending time with him. And I love some of the things he says. But one of the things he told me, he says, this is how I'm trying to think of how he worded it, but he says, this is how I measure my faith or belief. And I said, okay, I'm ready for this. He said, in the Bible, there's a story of the Ark of the Covenant being transferred. And the donkey stumbles. And the ark starts to wobble. And the guy puts his hand up on the ark to stabilize the ark. Do you remember what happened to him? He didn't die. He was killed. God said, don't touch. You touch. You did. He said, I remember that story. And I said, okay, good. He said, here's what I believe. If the Ark of the Covenant was sitting in the back of your church, I would not touch it. He said, I wouldn't touch it. He said, because I believe if I touched it, God would kill me, because he said not to touch it. He said, I know it's the simplicity. He said, but that's what he said, whenever I feel like I wouldn't care to touch it, then I know I'm in trouble. He said, as long as I know in my mind, he said, that's the way I process. And I thought, you know what? That's the problem. Most of us don't think of God like that. We don't think about how holy he is, how great he is, how high and God he is. We don't think about God's commandments when he says don't do or do this, that it's that important. But he said, you know what? If the ark was sitting back there, I would not go and touch it. And he said, as long as I feel that way, I know I believe there's a God. Because I know that I would be afraid to touch it. Guys, we got to learn to have sympathy for each other, to show grace, to show kindness. We got to be able to say, look, I understand what's going on. You know, I may have been there, I may not have been there, but I understand how you're feeling. I understand where you're at. The last thing we got to do in order to show grace to others And it's part of what we work on Celebrate Recovery also is called forgiving. It's called forgiving. I heard some people grunting. Forgiveness is hard, isn't it? Do you know why I think forgiveness is hard? I think it's because we have defined it of what it requires to forgive. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I think that's why we've got the definition of forgiveness all messed up. In Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 through 35, there's a story. We're not going to read it, but it's the story of the unmerciful servant. And in this story, the servant owed the king some money. And he goes up to the king and says, King, please have mercy on me. I don't have the money to pay you right now. But just have mercy on me. And because the consequences of not paying your debt is that you were thrown in jail. Or worse. But the king says, look, I'm paraphrasing, we're cool. Don't worry about it. I forgive you your debt. You're good to go. He had mercy on him. He had pity on him. Showed him grace. The guy goes out and he sees a guy that owes him money. So the difference would be he owed the king, let's say, $250,000. This guy owed him $50. So he goes up to the guy that owes him $50 and says, hey, dude, you owe me $50. The guy says, hey, I'm sorry, I just don't have it. And the guy says, look, you owe it to me. You need to pay me. He says, I don't have it. So he calls the guards and he has the guy thrown in jail. He just been forgiven of $250,000. This guy owes him $50,000, and he says, no, I'm not forgiving you. You're going to jail. The king finds out about it. So the king goes to the guy that owed him $250,000. He says, look, you're going to jail. You didn't show grace on him. I showed you grace. I showed you mercy. I released you of your debt. You owed it. You agreed that you owed it. You agreed that it was something you needed to take care of, and I released you of it. I paid it. I took care of it. And then you go out, and this guy owed you nothing compared to what you owed me, and yet you had him thrown in jail. Now you're thrown in jail. That's the story. There was no forgiveness in there. Look at 32 through 33. We're going to look at those two verses real quick. It said, then the master called the servant in. He said, you wicked servant, he said. I canceled all the debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? You wicked servant. What did God say for us? He says, look, just as freely as you have received, freely give. You think this parable that Jesus was telling us was just for fun? You think he was just talking to be talking? He was telling us, teaching us a lesson. He was telling us to be prepared for what was going to happen. He's like, look, I gave it to you. Now you give it to someone else. Show mercy. We want to receive mercy, but we don't want to give mercy. We want to be released of our debts, but we want people to pay what they owe. Oh, you don't understand what they said about me. They need to pay about it. You don't understand. They didn't bow to me when they're supposed to. They need to fix that. Don't they understand who I am? I'm the pastor. They're supposed to treat me this way. Stupidity, ignorance, hatred covers up grace every single time. Look at Matthew chapter 6, verse 12. It says, and forgive us our debts or our trespasses as we have forgiven, or as we also have forgiven our debtors. Forgive us our debts. Who's he talking to? No. Our Father which art in heaven. Who's he talking to? God. Says, hey, God, forgive me of my debts, comma, as we also forgive our debtors. Well, is that true? Let's see. Well, here in chapter 18, Jesus just did a parable and he said, you're a wicked man. I forgave you, but you won't forgive them? So before that, they say, hey, how do I pray, God? How do I pray, Jesus? Jesus says, here, this is how you pray. Our Father which art in heaven. And then he goes on and says, hey, and forgive us of our debts, forgive us of our trespasses, forgive us our sins, forgive us of the things we have done as we have forgiven others. Apparently we didn't get it. So then he goes and says, look, let me tell it to you another way. Here's another way to think about this piece of the Lord's Prayer. You wicked servant, I forgave you, but you won't forgive them. I released you, but you won't release them. Here's what forgiveness is not. It's not minimizing what happened. It's not restoring trust, and it's not forgetting. Isn't that what we've been told? Isn't that what we hold on to is what forgiveness is? Forgiveness is, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't, come on, really. Should you really be that angry? It's not that bad. You said you forgave me. How come you don't trust me? There's a lot of people I've forgiven in my life, but I don't trust them at all. There's people I have forgiven, I have released them, but yet I won't let them in my house. There's people that I have forgiven, but I still remember what they did. I still remembered what happened. I used to tell people, believe it or not, I used to be a smart aleck. And I used to tell people all the time when they would talk about forgiveness, and they would say, well, Jesus forgave, and I'd be like, yeah, and I ain't Jesus. Because you know what Jesus does? Jesus says, look, when I forgive you, I forgot. Did he not? Jesus said, when I forgave you, it's been erased. I remember it no more. But see, I'm not Jesus. I can't forget. I won't forget. So you think, well, if I remember, then I'm not forgiving. No, I still forgave you. I've still released it. I just remember what happened. I still don't trust you. Forgiveness is simple. This is what forgiveness is. You ready? Forgiveness is releasing to God the pain that others have caused me. That's all forgiveness is. We talk about that a lot in Celebrate Recovery. It's releasing the pain to God that others have caused me. I'm giving it to God. It no longer controls me. It's no longer part of my life. It's no longer something I think about every day. It's no longer something that keeps me from eating, from drinking, from focusing on life. I have released it to God. The pain is gone. It controls me no more. I haven't forgotten. I still don't trust you. But I've released it. The pain is no longer there. Look at Matthew 18, verse 34. It says, in anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all that he owed. See, God, forgiveness is very important to God. Not only did he say it in the prayer that he taught us of how we should pray to God and how to pray to him, but he goes back and gives us a parable. He reinforces it saying, look, forgiveness of each other, forgiveness for what happened is extremely important because I have forgiven you, and what I've given you, you're supposed to give to others. That's 2 times that Jesus talks about this subject of forgiveness. It's important. We get told in the parable, we get reminded in the parable that the king did not forget that the guy owed him money. Because if he forgot about it, what would have happened? Nothing. He knew. He said, look, I forgave you. You owe me more. I forgave you. You're a wicked man for what you just did. He didn't forget, but he forgave. He forgave. We've got to learn to forgive people. That's part of grace. We think, oh, well, I'm grace. I show grace. I'm kind to people I like. I'm sympathetic to people that I like, that I hang around, that are cool. So I'm good with grace. You know, I help people that are my friends. I help people I like. But I don't forgive very well. I stay angry all the time. I love to cuss people out. Matter of fact, I brag about it. I brag about because, this person cut me off and I just started. Really? And I followed them all the way to their house. I wanted them to know just how ticked off I was. Yeah, that's pretty good forgiving. Did you have your Jesus sticker? I sure did. All right. Second Corinthians 5:18 says, all this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ Jesus and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. Another version said, God, who brought us back to himself through what Christ did, has given us the task of reconciling people to him. See, guys, this whole series on grace for me has been a great reminder. It's been a great growth process for me to be able to see what God has in store for me, what he wants from me. It's reminded me of things that I had forgotten. It's easy in your Christian life to start to forget about what Christ did for us. It's easy to take for granted. What's the old saying? What once was an appreciation becomes an expectation. We just take that saving grace for granted because, we've been saved for a while. So we don't see the glory in it anymore. We don't see the magnitude of the sacrifice. We don't see what it really did for us. So then we begin to let the hardness of the world start to take over because we let the goodness of God begin to fade away. The light begin to come dim. Not because he's not shining it on us, not because he's building it inside us, but because we are pushing it down by allowing this other stuff in our lives. It's the hatred where we don't look outside and say, hey, this is my brother out there. He may not be part of the family today, but he has no chance of being part of the family if I don't do the part that God has for me to do. We talked about it a lot. There's three things three parts we have. You're either planting the seed, watering the seed, or the harvest. That's the three things that a Christian's going to do with every single person you meet. Every single person you meet. You're either seeding, watering, or reaping. If you're a believer, that's what you're doing. Which means every time that you do something of the world, every time you represent the world versus represent Christ, you're now stunting the growth and not allowing Christ to work. You're hardening their hearts. It doesn't matter what patch you wear, it don't matter what bumper sticker you have, it don't matter how many crosses you wear around your neck. None of that matters. What matters is what comes out of your heart. That's what matters. It matters whether you see a need and you act on that need. Or if you say, oh, I'll send somebody. Anybody ever do that? Oh, hey, I see you're in trouble. I'll send a tow truck. I got to go. I'm not a very good mechanic, but I'll pull over and talk to you while we're waiting on the tow truck. I'll pop the hood and look underneath with you if you want me to. I see the same wires that you see. I don't know what they do, but I see them. I see a need. I'll try to help you. I'll be there. You got to see the need. And you can only see the need of people if you're looking through the eyes of God. You can only see the needs of people if you're looking through the eyes of God, not the eyes of the world. The decision is always ours, every single day. Every day, we have to make a decision. Which glasses are we putting on today? Has anybody ever put on those glasses that they used to use to show you what it simulate being drunk? And you'd put you behind a car and say, okay, try to drive with these glasses. That's the glasses that the world has for us. You wouldn't believe how many of us every morning we have 2 pairs of glasses there and we decide to pick up the glasses of the world and we go through this world drunken and blinded, disoriented, trying to make it through, holding the walls, trying to see what's going on, swerving around thinking that we're going in a straight path. And it's not until we take off those glasses and we see how many cones we ran over, how many people's lives we've disrupted, how many people's lives we've messed up because we just decided to do what the world said was to do instead of doing what God said to do. Grace is something that was given to us freely, and it's something that we're supposed to freely, willingly, lovingly, caringly give to someone else. Give to everyone else. The Bible says when they see you, they should see me. When they see you, they should see Christ. When they see you, they should see Christ. The question is, do they know you or do they know Christ in you? Who do they know?